World is one. This week, calls for nations to sever ties with Israel over the Gaza war have intensified. Already, Namibia, Senegal and South Africa are part of a coalition known as the Hague Group that unveiled a coordinated legal, economic and diplomatic measures aimed at holding Israel accountable for its violations of international law. We'll talk about that shortly. The show starts now. Sudan's civil war between the Sudanese Armed Forces, or the SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, paramilitary, has produced the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. Estimates suggested tens of thousands of people have died from combat and thousands more have perished from disease and hunger brought on by the war, now well into its third year. There have been many significant military and political developments this month. Among them, the Sudanese army is consolidating its control over the capital Khartoum, which it took from the RSF in March. Here is our cover report. This video was published by Reuters on the 30th of August. Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, head of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, was sworn in as the head of a parallel Sudanese government, pushing the country a step closer towards de facto partition. Dagalo, known as Hemedti, has barely been seen in Sudan since the start of a 28-month-long war with the country's national army, but was sworn in the Sudanese city of Nyala.
As the head of the Presidential Council, to be faithful and honest in my loyalty to the Republic of Sudan and to carry out my duties and responsibilities seriously and honestly and with transparency in order to ensure the elevation and the progress of the Sudanese people and to commit to the transitional constitution and to protect it and preserve it and to keep the laws of the new Sudan and to defend the country's sovereignty.
One of Sudan's largest cities, situated in the West Darfur region, Nyala has served as the de facto capital for the RSF, which has appointed a prime minister and a presidential council led by Dagalo. The city has been frequently targeted with drone attacks. Although the RSF controls most of Darfur, it has been fighting the army and its allies fiercely for the city of El Fasher, the region's historic capital. It has besieged hundreds of thousands of civilians there, more than 500 days, forcing them to consume animal feed to survive. UNICEF said earlier this week that more than 1,000 children have been killed or maimed by air, artillery and ground attacks. The RSF says it has given civilians ample opportunity to leave. The Sudanese army has retaken control of central and eastern regions of Sudan and has been setting up its first government since the start of the war, which held its first cabinet meeting early this week. The vast Kordofan region that lies between the two forces' strongholds remains the site of fighting and attacks on small villages. The war between the forces has plunged half of Sudan's population into hunger, devastated its economy and created the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The Trump administration says it aims to end the conflict, but there has so far been little progress. A secret meeting reportedly took place in Switzerland between SAF Commander-in-Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and a United States advisor in mid-August, ostensibly to discuss a plan to end the war, and that's according to Sudan experts and media outlets. A week after the secret meeting, Al-Burhan retired several senior military officers, some of whom reportedly belonged to Sudan's political Islamist movement, which ruled the country for 30 years with former President Omar al-Bashir at the helm. Experts believe Al-Burhan is under external pressure to dilute the influence of prominent figures tied to the al-Bashir government.
We renew our commitment to continue the battle for dignity, to defeat the rebellion, and to make neither compromise nor reconciliation, whatever the cost.
Inside the Sudanese city of El Fasher in North Darfur, an estimated 260,000 civilians, including 130,000 children, remain trapped in desperate conditions, cut off from aid for more than 16 months. UNICEF says that at least 600,000 people, half of them children, have been displaced from El Fasher and surrounding camps in recent months. Aid has frequently come under fire and been blockaded by both sides in the war, which erupted from a power struggle in April 2023 and has caused what the United Nations calls the world's biggest humanitarian crisis. The RSF accused the Sudanese army of hitting the convoys as part of a drone attack on Melit Market and other areas. The army later said in a statement that this was a fabrication to distract from what it termed the RSF's crimes in El Fasher. The RSF's siege of El Fasher has cut off supplies and driven up prices. Experts determined that famine had taken hold in parts of the area last year.
Life is so hard. Sometimes we find a portion of animal feed. Other times we can't even find that. We're just staying, but the situation is very, very, very hard.
Civilians have come under artillery bombardment, drone strikes, as well as direct attacks. Camps for displaced people have been repeatedly attacked. Those who leave El Fasher face RSF checkpoints and most frequently come under attack, including sexual assaults. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One. Several African authorities are facing mounting pressure to sever ties with Israel and expel Israeli diplomats amid growing outrage over its genocide by starvation campaign in the besieged Gaza Strip. Since Israel went to war on Gaza, only Bolivia and Belize have severed diplomatic relations with Israel. At various points, the Muslim-majority countries of Bahrain, Chad, Jordan and Turkey have withdrawn their ambassadors, but all still maintain diplomatic ties with Israel. Here's a report.
First, it was Kenya, where hundreds of Kenyans participated in a protest in solidarity with the Palestinians in the war-battered Gaza Strip. Bikers and other drivers went around the capital city, Nairobi, waving Palestinian flags while some chanted, "Free, free Palestine."
What we can see happening in Gaza right now and what happened in Africa is basically the same, because they are going through occupation, we went through colonization, we share the same colonial masters. So, and we can't just sit back and watch what is happening there, the mass murders, the genocide, the starvation, and killing of innocent children and women. So we, as Kenyans, we need to speak up for Palestine so that this genocide and killing ends.
Then the protests spread to South Africa, where South African authorities are facing mounting pressure to sever ties with Israel and expel Israeli diplomats amid growing outrage over its genocide by starvation campaign in the besieged Gaza Strip. For its part, South Africa hasn't had an ambassador in Israel since 2018. But activists say the country needs to take stronger action against Israel. Many South Africans say that they were extremely disappointed with Cyril Ramaphosa's government's decision to ignore Parliament's November 2023 decision to sever ties with Israel. Also, dozens of protesters marched through Senegal's capital on August 24th, calling for an end to the war in Gaza and demanding their government sever diplomatic relations with Israel. The peaceful march drew lawmakers and civil society groups, activists who linked arms while chanting "No to genocide" and "Boycott Israel." The demonstration reflected a growing frustration in Senegal, a majority Muslim nation, over the international response to the Gaza conflict.
We expect at the national level that the Senegalese government breaks diplomatic relations with Israel. We also want international opinion, starting with Arab countries, to unite against Israel so that Palestinians can be independent, recover their land, and the war stops. Western countries must also respect UN charters and give Palestinians back their rights.
The fact that, in the eyes of the international community, Israel is doing what it is doing, pillaging lands, literally committing genocide, what legitimacy will we have when others, for example terrorists or other countries, allow themselves to do the same thing? For me, it's really essential. We cannot call something one thing on one side and refuse it on the other. The United States cannot, for example, support the war against terrorism and accept it for Israel. For me, it's really a question of security, but it starts with justice.
Similar protests have been held, especially in North Africa, like in Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, and Algeria, all in support of Palestinians. They seldom mention Israel or do not even speak about any relationship with the state. But, in a twist to the protests and condemnation, the Israeli government opened an embassy in Zambia on August 20th, more than 5 decades after it was shut during the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. The move, marked by a ceremony in the capital, Lusaka, attended by Israeli and Zambian foreign ministers, comes as Israel holds talks with several African countries about resettling Palestinian refugees. The timing raises questions about Israel's broader diplomatic strategy in Africa and how regional governments are responding.
Many countries in Africa are lining up for Israel to open an embassy in their capitals these days. We choose to begin in Zambia. We believe in Zambia's potential. We believe that Zambia is a country of values, domestically and in its foreign policy. We believe Zambia is a strategic partner for Israel in the southern part of Africa.
According to reports, Netanyahu has said, Israel is in touch with a few countries to find a destination for Palestinians who want to leave Gaza. He has consistently declined to provide further details. There is no evidence, however, that Israel has spoken to Zambia about resettling Palestinian people. Africa Bureau, WION, World is one.
Hundreds of workers poured onto the streets of Accra, Ghana's capital, calling for the cancellation of Africa's ballooning debt. Ghana, Africa's leading gold producer and the world's second largest cocoa exporter, is only now starting to recover from one of its worst economic crises in decades, which included a 2022 debt default and inflation that at one point exceeded 50%. The protest, led by Ghana's Trades Union Congress and backed by the International Trade Union Confederation Africa, called for a radical overhaul of the global debt system, which unions say is suffocating Africa's economic prospects.
Thousands of protesters marched through Ghana's capital, Accra, demanding the cancellation of African debt and calling for trade justice in a demonstration that drew participants from across the continent. The protest comes amid growing concerns over Africa's mounting external debt, which has more than doubled since 2020 to surpass $1 trillion by 2024, according to figures released by UNDP last week. Many sub-Saharan African countries now face a high risk of debt distress, with the region's average debt-to-GDP ratio approaching 60% by the end of 2024, up from around 30% a decade earlier.
Somalia has had a very, dangerous debt trap for decades. And just recently what we have achieved is to reach the completion point of Hemedti. And that point that we have reached, what we are demanding is we no longer need a new borrowing, a new debt. We do not want to go back to that same hole. What we want is grants to be provided to our country, for the international financial institutions, to support our country to recover.
Ghana, the host country for the protest, has recently made progress in addressing its own debt challenges. In January 2024, the nation reached a draft agreement to restructure $5.4 billion in debt, and its parliament approved a further debt restructuring deal in June 2025.
Why should African countries borrow so expensive as compared to its peers in other parts of the world? Why should it be? Why should the risk premium for African countries be so different from Europe, America, and other parts of the world? Why should that be? And because we are borrowing so expensive, we have so little debt, but the debt servicing cost is so expensive. And so maybe the time has come for us to look at what constitutes the cost, the spread that adds to the debt servicing cost for African countries.
Protesters argue that individual country efforts are insufficient to address the systemic issues plaguing African economies. They echo calls made by former African heads of state at a summit in Cape Town in March, which urged for comprehensive debt relief for highly indebted nations and lower borrowing costs across the board. In recent months, African diplomats from countries such as Zambia, South Africa, and Malawi have been lobbying the UK government to support legislation that would prevent private creditors from suing debtor nations during restructuring processes.
The cancellation of the debt will put us on a starting point, because right now Africa is at crossroads. So it will enable us to go back to the drawing board and to replan, re-strategize, and reconfigure. What debt do we want? How do we want it? How do we monitor it? And what will be its results? It will also cause us to relook at our institutions of governance and make sure that this time they are ready and prepared to deliver for the people.
I came from Nigeria to participate in this rally, just like many other participants that come from different parts of African countries. And we are here to do a conscious awakening rally to make our people understand the burden of the debts, how it's affecting all of us.
Organizers of Ghana's protest called for continued pressure on international financial institutions, creditor nations, and African governments to work towards a comprehensive solution that addresses both immediate debt relief needs and long-term structural reforms to prevent future crises. Africa Bureau, WION World is One.
After weeks of violent protests, a leading rights activist and former Chief Justice have emerged as presidential contenders, but can they succeed in the bare-knuckle world of Kenyan politics? President William Ruto has seen his popularity plummet since coming to power in 2022 over continued economic stagnation, corruption, police brutality and abductions targeting government critics. Ruto has stood firm against waves of violent protests seeking to force his resignation in mid-2024 and again in recent months, in which hundreds have died or even disappeared. But many are now looking for new faces who can challenge him at the next election in 2027. Here's a report.
Prominent Kenyan government critic Boniface Mwangi used this event at the KICC in the capital Nairobi to announce he would run for president in 2027, just weeks after the East African country's latest deadly protests. The 42-year-old has fiercely denounced President William Ruto, who has faced wave after wave of rallies condemning his leadership since last year, and argues he was tortured in Tanzanian custody for his political activism. Mwangi urged Kenyans to act now to take Kenya back into our hands. At a rally where youth-led demonstrations in 2024 sparked months of protests across the country, leaving more than 100 people dead.
I have selected this great day to announce that I'm going to be running for the President of the Republic of Kenya. Thank you. Thank
you. Rights groups have condemned police brutality and criticized the government's use of terrorism charges against protesters taking part in anti-government rallies. Mwangi himself faced terrorism charges over his connection to the recent protests, according to the police, but the charges were never formally submitted to court. Mwangi was also detained in May in neighboring Tanzania, where he was attending the treason trial of opposition leader Tundu Lissu.
As a country, we are broke, we are hungry, and insecure. Despite the so many called police reforms, the police has never been a service. The rule of law is broken. Justice has a price that only the rich can afford. So as we stand here, our country must be taken back into our hands. That is my call to you.
Along with firebrand activist Boniface Mwangi, another outsider, Kenya's former Chief Justice David Maraga is joining the 2027 presidential fray against William Ruto. 74-year-old Maraga made his name in 2017 when his bench of judges in the Supreme Court nullified the results of the presidential election over irregularities and illegalities, an unprecedented ruling in Africa. Maraga rejects claims that he lacks the charisma and brawn for politics.
And I see my country going down. And I see the youths being killed, being kidnapped, and I do nothing about it. I said no. I am prepared to go into the murky environment. The civic space is shrinking. And quite a number of leaders from many African countries don't want to be held accountable. You know, it is that view that you should not be held accountable that breeds the kind of violence we are seeing around, because they want to literally gag an opposition voice.
Ruto remains defiant, saying only he has a plan for the country based on mobilizing international investment and reforming public services. Ruto has also repeatedly proved his mastery of Kenyan politics, how to exploit its deep-rooted tribal divisions and mobilize voters with financial promises. While the protests of 2024 and 2025 showed there was a new generation of educated young Kenyans keen to move beyond that type of politics, experts say there is still a long way to go. However, political analysts say candidates like Mwangi and Maraga will struggle to stay clean. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One.
And that's all the buzz in Africa this week. Get in touch with us on all our social media platforms and our website and share your story with us from the continent. I'm Eric Njoka. Thank you very much for watching this week's episode of World of Africa on WION World is One. It's goodbye from me.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at yowon.com.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.